Today, I would like to start off by explaining the concept behind Qualibrate and the typical challenges we recognize at various organizations around testing and test automation. Next to that, I will explain why customers decide to use Qualibrate, and then we'll focus on a live demonstration showcasing the main functionalities of our solution. To talk about the concept behind our product, I would like to step back and look at a typical life cycle of an IT landscape and its impact to any given project team. In order for organizations to give continuity to their IT landscapes, teams get busy either by implementing innovation projects, like for example S/4HANA transformations, or maintaining their applications by deploying enhancements. We see these changes as events that have major impact on both your IT landscapes and your delivery teams. Each change event requires the team to prepare documentation of a specific change, usually done by functional or business analysts. Next, as a test analyst, we will receive a request to evaluate the different test scenarios. Some organizations might be mature enough to have an automated testing solution in place. And finally, at last, those changes will eventually be deployed in production, meaning that end users will need to know how to use that system. Maintaining those 4 deliverables is rather challenging, if not impossible, if teams are under pressure. We believe this is very inefficient. I hope you recognize this also at your company. Now, if we look at this picture, it was rather easy for us to only focus on the test automation step of the process, especially coming from a Q&A and testing background. However, as much as we think that automated testing is important, we strongly believe that quality goes beyond testing and also means having a great documentation, efficient test analysis, and smart training materials. This is the reason why we invented Qualibrate. Our aim is to make the change process more efficient and simpler for teams. That's why we created a recording widget, which you see on the left-hand side. And with this recording widget, the business analysts can start doing the recording of a business process in SAP or any web application, for example, SAP Fiori or Salesforce. Then when you're done recording the business process, you save it to our cloud, and you have direct input for your automated test for regression testing, your manual test for user acceptance testing, your business process documentation, and of course, at last, the end user training. So also the nice part of Qualibrate is whenever you have a change in your project lifecycle, you update that change only once, and all those 4 deliverables will be updated automatically. Our value proposition is quite straightforward, getting more with less. We already see customers benefiting from Qualibrate around the globe. For example, Heineken has been able to optimize their regression performance with more than 90% time savings, which is quite a lot, which is actually critical for Heineken to be more agile on maintaining continuity on their full SAP landscape. Next to that, we are happy to be ramping up our customer base, not only here in Europe, but also in Americas with US customers like Textron and Bell Helicopter. As you all registered for this webinar, you had the chance to select what kind of application you would like to see tested. As you could see in the graph, the most of you choose again for the SAP GUI system. So therefore, I will show you a demonstration how you can start testing your SAP GUI system. So let's move into the demonstration. So what I will do now is I'm going to open up a web application, and I'm going to my Qualibrate instance. As you can see, Qualibrate is a cloud solution, but of course we also have the possibility to move to on-premise. As I'm now logged in with my username and my password, you see I can select several projects within my username. For now, I'm going to select a demo project. On the left-hand side, you can see an example on how you can structure your business processes within Qualibrate. If you have this structure in Solution Manager or Excel, you can import this structure into Qualibrate. And this way you don't have to create these folders manually. But of course, you also have the possibility to create it manually. But for now, if I open up Sales and Marketing, underneath that we have a process. In this case, it's quotation processing. And then underneath that, we have a blue folder, which is a business process, which in this case is create quotation. But since we can execute the create quotation multiple ways, we would like to record every single variant. Therefore, underneath the business process, you have a red icon, which we call a flow. And the flow is basically a variant of a business process. You can also call it your test case. If I open up one recording, you can see at the flow sequence the outcome of a recording. But for this webinar purpose, I will select where I'm going to do the recording of a business process. Since you all selected, or the most of you selected SAP GUI, I'm going to start the recording under this folder. If on the other hand, you would like to see a recording on another application, for example, Salesforce or SAP Fiori, please don't hesitate to contact me and I'm happy to show you in demonstrations beside the webinar. But for now, I'm going to create a new flow, so a new test case or a process. And I'm going to call it Demo Webinar. As you could see, the flow sequence is at this point empty. At the main details tab, we can add more information about the process. For example, a status and a criticality. This way you can also do some risk-based testing. Here you can add all kinds of information, for example, how the process is built. You can also attach documents to your process as well. You can upload them from here. Since the flow sequence is empty now we are going to start doing the recording of a business process. So I will select the second button here to trigger the recording widget to open. So from this point on, the business analyst will start doing the recording of a business process. Since they normally know how the process works, but they don't have a lot of technical knowledge, we try to keep the recording widget very simple and easy to use. That's why it only has a couple buttons. Here you can select what kind of application you're going to test on. I'm going to select the SAP GUI. If I made a mistake, I can say undo the last recorded action. I can also show or see technical details. If I made many mistakes, instead of selecting the undo button several times, you can also hit cancel. We can store, for example, certain values. We can add certain notes, and we can add verification points, kind of like checks within your test case. If we want to look something up that does not have to be recorded, we can also pause it or go for coffee. The only thing we're going to do now is we're going to give the task name a name. So that's kind of to give you more structure within your test case. So I call them chapters. So the first chapter for this test case will be Login SAP. So what I will do now is I'm going to open up my SAP system and I will log in. The recording widget will capture everything that I'm performing on the system. The data that I'm entering, the screenshot of every step, the technical knowledge behind every step, and the user description. And I'll show you later on how that looks like. But basically, you can purely focus on doing the recording of a business process. Since we created now the first chapter, which is Login SAP, you can also open up the recording widget to see what has been recorded. The last action to log in was pressing enter, but you can also hit back to see what has been recorded. Here you can see, for example, on the type in the user, my recorded value is user 11. If I made a mistake or I want to adjust it, I can easily adjust it here. Or later on when I save it to the cloud platform, and I'll show you later on how you can handle data within Qualibrate. So this is the first chapter. Normally what you would do now is you would save this recording and use it as a building block in an end-to-end scenario so that you only have to record the login SAP only once. But for now, I'm going to just record it in the same test case because we don't have that much time. So I'm going to create a second chapter, which in this case will be create quotation. So now I'm going to use the transaction code V821 to create the quotation. And as you can see, I can again focus on performing the create quotation. And like I said before, the recording widget will capture everything that you're performing on the system, even if it's an SAP GUI system or a web application. So it's capturing a description on every step what I'm performing, the data that I'm entering, a screenshot of every step, including a highlight actually, and the technical knowledge behind every step. And actually, you know what is very powerful of Qualibrate is that if you're doing a recording on a web application, it will automatically capture the CSS selector to identify every object on the web page. So now I created the quotation. I will create now a third chapter, which in this case will be view quotation, because I would like to show you how you can add the verification point within your process. So kind of like a check within your test case. So let's say that we wanted to add a check that if we have a material of P100 and a quantity of 1, that we want to add a verification point on the net value of 2,600. That we always get this value. So I will hit verify. As you can see, you can do that on every part of the application. But for now, I'm going to hit the net value. I can also open it up to see what has been recorded. You can also go to the configuration to find some more information about this verification point. What a very strong capability of Qualibrate is that we kind of have two layers within Qualibrate. We have the first layer, which is the basic layer, which is very business friendly. Like the entire team within your organization can use Qualibrate. So instead of, for example, verifying net value from containing to, let's say, equals to, so that's kind of the first layer. But if you're a developer and you want to add some code to your test, you can also go to the second layer of Qualibrate, which is the advanced configuration. And then you can see the code behind the step. But for now, I'm going to hit cancel. But what I will do is I'm going to change the recorded value to a lot of 5s. Please remember that for when I'm going to execute this as a test. So I think you get the point of how easy it is to do a recording of a business process. So I'm going to create the last chapter, which is log off. There we go. So now I'm going to hit save. I'm going back to my web application. I'm hitting refresh. And this is the output of my recording. So basically my documentation. I created 4 chapters: log in SAP, create a quotation, view, and log off. And as you can see, every chapter has its own user actions. So to log in SAP, I first connected to an SAP session. Then I filled in my username, then my password, and then selecting enter, pressing enter. As you can see, every step has a readable description, which is all been automated by the recording widget. So instead of writing down what you're performing and adding a screenshot, everything is automated for you within Qualibrate. You can also open up the recording widget to see, the screenshot, to see a screenshot of every step, including the highlights. So every step has its own screenshot, including a highlight. Now, it's great that we have this easy documentation with just one single recording. But what happens if your process changes? So then you need to maintain your process. So what happens, for example, if on step 2.6, we need to add the sales office within my process? That means that we need to record it again. So instead of doing the whole recording again, you just add the part that has been added or changed. So I will say record from step, and there you go. You can just add the part that has been added or changed. So this way, you don't have to do the whole recording again. Now, if they're not in the right sequence, you can also drag and drop them or to the second chapter. Or you can also say insert in step manually or delete a step. So you have all kinds of options to be able to maintain your process as efficient as possible. As you see in the description, I forgot to tell you, you can also add or change the description. So let's say, for example, here on Connect to SAP, we want to add some more information. For example, it's SAP the GUI. So it's very adjustable. We can also open up the technical details to find some more information or to add some comments. So let's say, for example, here on my user, I want to add a comment that you can also use user 12. Then at the user tab, you can find some more information. Here you can find the user action. If it has been changed, you can manually change it here as well. You can see the parameter name, which is also again adjustable. The parameter type, and you can make a step mandatory or optional. Then at the automation tab, you can find some more technical knowledge behind every step. So this is all being taken during the recording, from the recording widget. Now I've entered some data during my recording. So underneath my test case or underneath my flow, you can find the data set that is automatically being generated. Here you see the steps that required some data, right? That I entered the data during my recording. You see actually all the data here, right? This is kind of like an online sheet. So if you want, you can also adjust it to a different kind of value. So this way you can also add or change some data. I will show you later on how you can add more data. I would first like to show you how can you use this recording as an automated test. So now here on the top right, you can start this recording as a training session, as a manual test, or as an automated test. So let's first start with the automated execution. I have to select what kind of data set. I only have one, so I'm going to select only that one, and which iteration. Now I hit start execution. As you could see, it's basically performing exactly what I just performed in the SAP GUI system. So without any code, I can start test automation. So it's kind of scriptless test automation. To be honest, I'm not a very technical person, so that means that even your business is able to start with test automation. So what I'm doing here now is I'm going to, it's going to view the quotation. And on the bottom right, you see exactly what is performing at the moment. You see which flow, which data set, and which iteration, and then which step. And as you can see, we're now at verifying the net value. It will try 20 seconds to execute this step. Since we're running it now in debug mode, meaning that if something happens that's not supposed to happen, I will receive a task maintenance one-time window. And that's exactly what we're getting at the moment. So as you can see here, we're in chapter 3, view quotation, step 3.4. We're verifying the net value. We can even open up the screenshot to see about which step we're talking about. Since I changed the value from 505 and the actual value is 2600, that's why we're getting this result as a fill. If it's a data-related issue, you can try it again with a different value, which in this case, of course, it is a data-related issue. If it's on the hand not, you can go to object properties and find some more information. If you're lost and you don't know about which element we're talking about, you can say highlight element to see if it's still about the right element. And of course, in this case, we are. If on the other hand, you're a developer or you have a lot of technical knowledge, you can go again to the configuration to find more information of the step. But for now, I'm going to hit skip action and continue with my test. There you go. That was our first automated test that we run together. Applause, guys. Okay, but now we've run this test. Now we want to see the logs of the test. Here you can find that we only tested it once. You can see by executed who, the start date, the end date, and the status of that test. You can also open up the log to see what has been, or to find more information. Here on the left-hand side, you see the user steps. And here you can find the step details and the data and input details. And here you find a new screenshot that has been taken during the execution. So here you see on every step more information. And here you see that I've skipped it. So this is basically the log of your test. So now we've run it as an automated test, but now we can also run this as a manual test. For example, for user acceptance testing. So instead of having your Excel sheet next to you with the test case and the actions you have to perform, now you have it in your window from Qualibrate. You have the 4 chapters, and you have the steps, but also the data, and now you have some buttons. If you perform the step manually, you can say pass or fail. You can say skip for if it's not relevant. You can say show me for if you're lost in the SAP system and you don't know where to select the value or fill in the value, because SAP can be sometimes very complex, or Salesforce as well. You can say do it for me, as it will perform this step automatically. I can show or add comments, and I can find a screenshot of the step. So basically everything you need to perform the manual test as fast as possible. So let's say, for example, we want to test something here in the create quotation. So what I will do is I'm going to use the do it for me action to get to the point that I really want to test manually. So let's say we want to go to the create quotation, like I said before, because there we want to test something really manually. There we go. So let's say we want to test the press enter manually. So I'm doing that myself now. There we go. And let's say we're lost, so we don't know where to fill in this value QT for the quotation. We can say show me, as it will highlight live on the application where to fill in the data. We can also add or show comments, like I mentioned before. Let's say it's not a defect, but you do want to be saying something to your team as a message. And of course, again, the screenshot. All right. Well, that's the accelerated manual test, which you can use for UAT. I hope it was clear for you all. If not, please mention any questions in the chat. I see there are some questions, so that's great. Okay, now we've done just a little bit of a recap. What did we do? We did a recording of a business process on SAP GUI. Then I saved it to our cloud and I showed you the outcome of that recording, so the documentation which you're looking at now, and how easily you can maintain this process. I've executed it as an automated test and as a manual test, even though I don't have any technical knowledge. So it's kind of like scriptless test automation. But now how can we handle the data? So underneath the flow, we can find the data set. So we have here one iteration within this data set. But let's say we want to do this test, but now with a different sales organization. So instead of doing the whole recording again, we just basically copy this iteration. And we say, let's test it also with sales organization 1001. Now we have 2 tests within this process, because we have the default and the default copy, which is with different sales organizations. Now, if we want to test with different, let's say, thousands of different sales organizations, we can also download it to Excel. And as you understand, use the power of Excel by using all kinds of formulas. Let's say, copy this iteration. There we go. We have to make the iteration name unique. And let's say, let's test again with different sales organizations. So let's change that. There we go. I'm going to hit save. And I'm going back to my web application. And I can say upload data, browse for file. I'm going to select my data set. There you go. Now within this data set, we have multiple iterations that you can run now as a test case. If on the other hand, you want to separate data sets, that's also a possibility. So in this case, you just create a new data set, let's say for data set UK. So that's also a possibility within Qualibrate. And just as a reminder, guys, I'm just showing you the main functionalities of our solution. So we might not cover everything. So of course, you can always contact me later with more questions. So what we can now do is like what I mentioned when I started my recording, that the login SAP, normally you would hit save and use it as building blocks in end-to-end scenarios. On the top here, you see a scenario, SAP scenario. And if I go to the execution sequence, you will see which kind of test cases will be executed in this scenario. So as you could see here, the demo login, which is here, will be executed in this scenario. Let's say we want to delete this create contact. We can easily just say delete instance. Now let's say we want to add our flow, our test case. How you do that is basically easily dragging, dropping it to the SAP scenario. And as you can see, it will be added within my scenario. But let's say from, this is all SAP GUI, as you can see here. Let's say afterwards you want to log in and perform something in Salesforce in your end-to-end scenarios. That's also a possibility. Let's say, for example, here we want to add create contact. So I'm going to add it here within my scenario. And now within this scenario, we will cover an SAP GUI recording, but also a Salesforce recording. Now at the execution sequence, you can find the logs of the test. You can also open it up again to see exactly what has been performed. But of course, you can also export this to PDF, for example, for audit purposes. So here you find more information with regards to the scenario. And here you see every step that has been taken during the execution. So this is handy for audit purposes. What I didn't mention, of course, you can run your test, your regression tests, also to schedule it, right? So let's say you want to schedule it for every Sunday, that when you come to the office on Monday, you just want to see the results of the test. Of course, that's also a possibility within Qualibrate. Now, since we have showed you how to test it with an automated test and a manual test, the data set, I would like to show you now also some more about the defects. So on the top, you can find also a defect module. Of course, if you find any defects, you can also log them within Qualibrate. You can let me open up a defect to show you some more information. And this is just an example on what kind of fields you can have within the defect module within Qualibrate. Of course, this is completely different per customer, and therefore this is completely configurable per customer. As you can see, I made a lot of comments here. Why do I do that? Because within Qualibrate, whenever I put in a comment, people assigned to this defect, for example, Ellen, my colleague, and my colleague Emmett, will get a notification email. So we kind of have an email notifications behind the defects. You can also go to the attachments, if there are any attachments, and to the history to find history of the defect itself. So these are the defects module within Qualibrate. We also have a dashboard module, because everything that you have within Qualibrate, you can basically report on. So since you want to create your own dashboards, these are completely configurable. So you can create your own graphs and your own charts. Okay, let me see. I hope I've showed you the main functionalities now of our solution. I'm not sure if I'm missing something. It's a bit difficult because it's not really interactive. But let's do a quick recap again. So what I did a recording of a business process on SAP GUI. Then I saved it to our cloud and I showed you the documentation part and how easy it is to maintain this process. I showed you the data set behind and how easy it is how to export it to Excel and import back new data, and how to execute this test as an automated test and as a manual test. And now, of course, within Qualibrate, we have a defect module where you can find the defects of your project. You can also find the defects related to this flow at the defects tab here. And of course, also the dashboard. So you can basically create your own reporting within Qualibrate. And at last, the SAP scenario, that you can use these recordings as building blocks in your end-to-end scenario. even though if that's covering SAP or a web application. And then of course you can use these logs for audit purposes. Thanks everybody for joining. I hope I gave you a clear understanding on how Qualibrate is a tool for test automation, but not only test automation, but also for documentation and training.
Thanks a lot, and have a nice evening, you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.